Hello and welcome today. I'm really thrilled to have with us Sophia. She's a naturopath and also my dear friend at Designs for Health. Welcome, Sophia. I'm so glad to have you with me today.
Hello, hello. Thank you. Very excited to have a chat to you.
We're going to have a great chat, aren't we? We're exploring the GI map, which is otherwise known as the poo test, where
Yes.
I love it because with a lot of my clients, I'm using it because they've got these digestive issues. They've been going on for a long time. So, a lot of my clients, as you know, Sophia, have been struggling for months, some have been years. And I've had clients who've been 20, 30, 40 years, they've been struggling with digestive issues. So, we take the guess, test, don't guess approach. And I love it because the GI map gives us that view of all the different aspects of what's going on in that person's digestive system at a particular point in time. So
Yes.
for you, like my clients are doing the poo. So they're taking the sample in the little container, putting it in the little vial, sending it to America. And then that's kind of the last they think of it until they hear from me about 3, 4, 5 weeks later with the results. So, what's happening in that meantime? You're getting it
And
in
then I
your
like how,
office?
yeah, and then I like how we then talk about someone else's poo. One of
Yeah,
my favorite things to do.
I know. And people are always embarrassed, aren't they? They're like, I don't want to talk about it. But usually after a while, they see that we're really energized by it because it tells
Yeah,
us
look.
so much.
And I think we should start normalizing that. That's my, favorite topic at the dinner party.
Oh dear.
It's like, yeah, we're naturopaths, we're normalizing poo.
That's it. That's it. So it's
So
going off to
what's
the US
yeah,
and
so initially it comes actually to Designs for Health office in Manly. So a little overview. So Designs for Health is distributing the test in Australia, but the actual lab, the Diagnostic Solution Lab, is located in US because they are the pioneers in this technology. So the technology is the quantitative PCR. So and many people are familiar with this technology because this is how we'll be doing COVID tests. So when you're looking at the actual DNA, so it's a molecular DNA. So the old school tests, stool tests, and something that other companies are still doing was literally a culture, right? So they when they take a little bit of a poo, put it in a petri dish, see what grows, and then analyze it that. But it wasn't really a good method because we would not get a full picture of that. So with the bacterial DNA, we can see things at the tiniest levels, even when your normal poo test that your GP can do cannot be detected. So, for example, we often find different parasites or things like Helicobacter pylori when the GPs have cleared it as it's not there, just because it is looking at that deeper layer with the DNA analysis. After we receive it at Designs for Health in here in Sydney, in Manly, we properly freeze it because it has to be processed in a specific way. So we dry freeze it, repackage, and with the DHL, send it to US. It's very time sensitive. That's why we're really on top all the time to make sure that it's all properly persevered. And that's why you can also only do it on a specific day of the week because we don't want the sample to get old. And because it's a fancy technology, expensive test, we want to make sure that it's all done very proper. So yes, then we send it to the US, and they have a massive lab of scientists that do the analysis. The way they do the process, so they do, so that there's a machine, it's a fancy equipment that is doing this analysis, and then there's a scientist that is reviewing the results and basically going through them. After that, results get released. In your case, Vanessa sees them, and then if there is something worth exploring in more depth, we catch up and always have a deep conversation about your poo. I think it's
absolutely.
always a good idea. That's my favorite thing to
Yeah. And I
do.
really value that from your organization. So when I get test results, often I'll be like, wow, what's happening here? And I give you a call and we unpack it and we say, okay, what's happening for this person? What are their symptoms? I'll often ask you, how do I know that this is correct? And you'll often reassure me for some of the measures that they've retested it a couple of times, particularly if the
Mm,
numbers quite out of range. So it's a
yes.
fantastic, I feel like I've used other tests. And this has been a fantastic service that you offer, which is fabulous because I'm able then to
Thank you.
support my clients even better.
Because also on our end, because we specialize in this, and I as an expert specialize in this as well, you always stay up to date with the latest research. So for example, today I have learned about one specific bacteria being strongly associated with Parkinson's disease, where you wouldn't even think of when someone's getting diagnosed with Parkinson's. You don't really
Mm.
go and say, oh, let's test my gut, maybe something's coming from there, right? But now we know that there's such a strong correlation. So yeah, and it's fascinating how much we can give back to the community by being on top of that research and then sharing it with practitioners so they can help their patients.
It's quite significant, isn't it? And you and I have these conversations often about the links in science. And look, we often even assume we can come up with a hypothesis of what a person's gut looks like. We're not always
Mm,
correct, based on their conditions because the science is catching up. And there are autoimmune triggering bacteria and sustaining bacteria in the gut. And for a lot of the clients that I work with who have autoimmune conditions, children with juvenile arthritis, even thyroid conditions, we see these bacteria showing up more and more. Should we go through the example test,
yes,
Sophia?
yes,
Would that be a
please.
good idea? And yes, we
I
love it.
think so. We
So it's
love it.
called I'm a Sample. I love it. It's funny. So this is what we get, don't we? This is
Yeah.
the example test. So the front page has got the pathogens, and you and I, if we see pathogens on the front page, we definitely pause, don't we?
Mm, we definitely pause, but the way I like to look at the report, and I want to suggest that we start from there, is from the page number 4 when we look at the intestinal health markers.
Ah, do
Because,
you?
yes,
Yeah.
because, look, in general, yes, in the report, we will see pathogens and good
Yeah.
bacteria and opportunistic bacteria,
Yeah.
meaning the bacteria that's overgrowing when the condition is not correct. But essentially, we want to see what is happening in the gut, how the
Yeah.
gut is responding.
Yeah. I
Because
love that
sometimes,
you
for
do that.
example, because
Just before you go
sometimes,
on with that, so
yeah,
every practitioner has their own approach, right? And so my
mm,
step one is this page where I go,
mm.
all right, what am I dealing with? Is there anything major? And my step two is exactly what you said. So you go here for step one. We're just, because
Yes, well,
this is
kind of as well.
critical. This is
You
critical,
probably
right?
flick through that because also I understand your approach as well because you'll see, oh, is there a pathogen? And then you see what's
Yeah,
happening in the gut. Because usually, even the big pathogens, to me, they are often a symptom of being there because of the environment.
the
I'm a
terrain.
big believer,
Yeah,
and we talked so many times about it, that it's all about the gut environment. It's how are you feeding it, and things like stress, food, all the environment, how is affecting your gut, and that is making such a big impact.
it's
Because then
huge, isn't it?
and another thing, you may have the E. coli or C. diff or any other full-on pathogen, but they may not really cause any symptoms,
Yeah, and that
and then there
happens,
would
doesn't
be
it?
more of a
We see that
transient,
often.
yes, very
Yeah,
often, and there would be either more of a transient, so yes, you got the exposure, but it hasn't really affected you because the immune system is so strong. So
absolutely.
yes, and going back to this page
Because it
in
is
here.
confusing for clients where we're going through the results and I zoom right past all the results and they say, where are you going? I see red. And I'm like, no, no, no. We need to start at the bottom and get
Yes.
that landscape and understand what the terrain is telling us. What's your digestion doing?
Mm, agree, and I'm even thinking, maybe properly reach out like a petition to the lab to say, can we restructure the report that this section is first
Good
so it
idea.
makes more sense.
Good idea.
Maybe we'll do that. So
Now tell
yeah,
me,
this
why is this so important for you up front?
why this is important. Well, yes, as we discussed, that this is the terrain, this is what
Mm,
is happening, this is your environment, this is literally the state of your gut. Because if you think about it, in the test in general, we're looking at two major things: how the health of the gut is doing, and what's the composition of the gut microbiota, which is kind of a not us, right? So this is the part of the report that is us, and we want to see what is happening to us. The first section in here talks about the digestion. So a very, very important part of our digestive system is how we actually breaking down food. How is our pancreas working? How is our bile working? How are we, breaking down, digesting, absorbing specific foods? And for example, it's important to know that if someone presents with a constant bloating, it may be easily just an issue with the digestion.
Oh,
It may has nothing to do, it may have no bacteria, no overgrowth, nothing. It may just suggest that, the pancreas for some reason is not working optimally and you're not producing enough enzymes to break down the food.
we
Or
see it often, don't we?
we see it
Absolutely.
often.
Yeah.
Or sometimes even, it's interesting with the steatocrit, the first one. It's if it's elevated, it suggests that the fat is not absorbed properly and not digested properly. And how often we see association with that and some of the deficiencies, even like dry skin, and
Yeah.
people have, some hormonal issues, and all sorts of things can come just from an ability to digest fat,
Yeah.
which tells us again that it's, way more than just your digestive system.
It
Literally
absolutely
anybody's
is.
system is connected in here.
And I think for you and I, we don't stop here. We don't go, oh, wow, you're not digesting fat. Take this pill or do this. What we do is we go deeper and we go, well, that's very interesting. Why? Why?
Yeah.
And also, what's the flow on effect? So if your steatocrit is up there, over 20, we see it often, you're not absorbing potentially your vitamin A, E, D, K,
Mm-hmm.
your fat solubles. So often people are constantly low in vitamin D, and here we go. We know why. Well, we don't know
Yep.
why, but
Yep.
we're getting closer. And also
Exactly.
their poo floats. So if you're not digesting your fat, your poo will often float.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I love this, because it just gives us those extra clues as a detective to keep on digging. This isn't
Yes.
it. This isn't the last resort. We keep going from here, don't we?
Yes.
And this is an
Absolutely.
example, isn't it, where we look at the GI markers, the beta glucuronidase. So Sophia and I are going to say big words today, and it's not important that you know exactly what they are. But again, this is a real classic one, isn't it? That can be a big
Mm,
hint for us as to what's
yes.
going on.
So beta glucuronidase, it's actually a very interesting molecule. So the big connection in here would be to liver health and to your hormones, and especially to the estrogen.
Mm,
Because when beta glucuronidase is elevated, what is happening in your body, in your gut, where estrogen should be detoxified from the body, it gets reabsorbed back into the circulation. As the result, contributing to a variety of conditions and symptoms that are, have high estrogen as one of the highlights in there. And that would be, from your PMS cases, hormonal acne, to things like endometriosis and even, reproductive cancers.
mm.
So it's really a massive range of the gut issues that can then contribute to this hormonal imbalance. Because quite often we would be working on different phases, but not necessarily looking at the gut. And then, this quite often in my clinical practice as well, by seeing this and giving specific supplements that will help to bind it, to clear it through the body, but also to, help to prevent that from happening. As you said initially, we don't stop here. We don't just say, oh, it's high. We're always thinking, well, why is it high, right? And then, yeah, basically by just addressing that, you see a massive improvement in even very, full-on conditions such as endometriosis.
Oh, absolutely. It's significant, isn't it? And
Mm,
I suppose the thing as well with this one is I'm always thinking about genetics and what's the interplay here with their epigenetics and what's going on. Because for some people like myself, like I can get it down within a couple of months, which is
yep.
fantastic, and I can keep it down. But if I don't do the things that I need, Vanessa's operating manual for health as a perimenopausal woman, if I don't do the things, it will creep back up. And that's because of my genetics. So
Yes. Well,
that's one of
yes,
the things that is the other overlay, isn't it? Where our biochemistry and our genetics come in. And we've got another
Yes.
video on that, on the metabolic test. But it all starts to come into play for some people, especially who've been chronically sick for a long time. That
Yes.
that some of these factors we can optimize.
And exactly as you said, correctly, we will then from there dig deeper to see, is it the genetic involvement? Is it the gut dysbiosis involvement? Because there could be a few different
Could be.
reasons to that. And
Yeah.
which makes us, I guess, great in our profession because, we never stop digging.
We never stop digging. Now let's talk. We're not going to go through every single point here, but I think I'll just pull out the important ones. Well, they're all important, but the ones we see often. So the secretory IgA, so that's the
Mm,
mucosal lining of the gut, and we often see it very low or very, very high, don't we? I very
yes.
rarely see it in the green,
It's
maybe
my favorite marker.
2% in the green. It's your favorite.
Mm.
Tell me
It's
why.
my favorite because this is your gut mediated immunity. So this is your army in the gut. And the state of this secretory IgA will determine how are you gonna face anything that comes from outside. So quite often, when it's low, what we see, multiple food sensitivities. Person can't eat this, can't eat that, can't eat that, because you don't have immune cells to properly process it, right? So you end up in a state where everything is, damaging and triggering you because you just don't have an army to deal with it. Or when we see it's very low, it's often also is associated with general poor immunity. Poor immune cells. People frequently get sick. People frequently, have like allergies and whatnot. So and most of our immune cells are made in the gut, and the secretory IgA is one of the things that's really determining on how things will progress from there. And then, of course, from there, it extends to a variety of different conditions. So, for example, low level secretory IgA can lead to overgrowth of bad bacteria, of pathogens. Sometimes when I see low secretory IgA and then I'll see a few, let's say, parasites, I'll be like, look, they are there most likely because the secretory IgA is low because your immune cells are low and you don't have enough of the resilience to that. So it's kind of the resilience marker. And then often by improving that again with specific interventions, we can see that many pathogens or overgrowth opportunistic bacteria just literally disappear. We sometimes don't even need to do some, antimicrobial work
Absolutely.
because this is such a strong innate ability to combat anything that comes at us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of people don't know that 70 plus, they're thinking closer to 80% of the immune system is in the gut
Yes,
associated lymphoid tissue, it's called the GALT. And, you know, especially people who have been exposed to COVID or have had long COVID, I'm seeing this number in the hundreds, like with a one in front of it, which is
yes,
very, very, very chronically low. Um, on the flip side, mine was over 6,000 the other day.
same, same.
I wasn't going to dump you in it. I was going to see if you wanted to admit it. Um, because I can't
Let's share our
tolerate,
story, Vanessa.
yeah, I can't tolerate gluten. I've got all the celiac genes. I can't eat enough to get the biopsy done because I just get so sick. So I got the dermatitis, how do you say it? Herpes rash, the celiac rash. And I was like, oh, Mitchy. And I had the gut test there. And it was a Sunday. So you always have to do the gut test on a Sunday or a Monday. And I thought, the perfectionist in me, Sophia, was like, no, I'll wait. I'll wait until I feel better. And then I thought, no, I want to know what it is like today because I think I've been exposed to gluten. Well,
Mm. And
my
this is an
results
amazing time to do that because you get
were,
more answers.
yeah, my results, as you know, were crap. So I was over 6,000 here. I think, over 500 here, over 500 here, which we'll get to these ones, which is hugely indicative that, as you know, like if you've got a very big number here, your immune system is on fire.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, low numbers suggesting that there's not enough of you to fight something. Higher
Mm.
numbers suggest that you are actively fighting through something. And most of the time, if we compare it, and let's straight away, since we're on the topic, talk about the one below, which is your
Mm.
anti-gliadin. If we see both of them elevated, it suggests a very strong reaction to gluten. And this is how we can really, understand what is happening. And let me share a little bit of my story in here, because I'm generally the way I live, but is by something called the hygiene hypothesis. And we talked about it many times. I'm the person who's like, I'm not washing my hands, I'm not literally washing anything, I'm eating stuff off the floor. And it kind of started organically because it felt right, but then the more I was learning about it, the fact that you introduce the variety of the bacteria and microbes in your body, it really makes you more resilient because you're continuously training your immune system. And then, I can easily say that I have a very strong gut and strong immunity, and that
So
it's
you're
really
not
hard to
washing
get.
fruit or veggies or
Look, if something's store bought, I tried more of a pesticide. But if
yeah.
something's like on the floor or like I'm touching something somewhere, animals, other people, everything goes into my mouth. I really don't care. And so, look,
Oh dear.
and what
You're
I thought,
hilarious. I love your
and I've done,
honesty.
and I've done the GM app. And what
Yeah.
I thought I'll see all the pathogens, all the parasites. I was expecting literally a bouquet. And I thought, I'll just say, but I'm living happily with them, because that's another thing.
You
Sometimes
can.
we see a parasite and you're like, well, if it's not causing any trouble and you feel
Yeah.
great, go on, live with your parasite.
You actually can.
So,
And in certain countries, we test their guts, don't we, in science, and they're carrying
mm,
way more pathogens than us, and they're incredibly healthy.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So, and basically what I've seen, to go back to the fact that
Mm.
we don't like to guess, we like to test, because I thought I'll see all that, because my gut hasn't been really good lately, and I thought, okay, finally it got you right. Your
Yeah.
hygiene hypothesis. And what do I see? I see something that looks like a celiac disease, because the reaction to gluten was so strong, and I would
Mm.
never think of it, never,
Yeah. You
because
eat a
my
lot of
diet is very
gluten.
good
We
and
talk
it's very
about it.
clean,
Yeah,
and I
you
don't eat
eat
too
gluten.
much. I eat gluten, but I don't eat too much. But I would never think of that being an issue, because I wouldn't
Mm.
have the direct correlation with that.
Yeah.
And what do you think? I look at that, I see all these numbers. Well, I emailed you straight away to
Yeah,
say,
I
oh
know
my
you
God, guess
did.
what? And
I
I
think
see
your
the
email
reaction to
was like,
gluten.
I got my GI map, open it up and tell me what you think. And I almost fell off my chair. I was like, it looks
Yeah, because
exactly like mine.
yeah. And and again, fascinating, because now it's absolutely different approach. If I would think, oh, if I would just guess, it
Mm.
would be, oh, probably I need to do some antimicrobials or whatnot. But no, it's a
It wouldn't
completely
have worked
different
for you.
story.
So, Sophia, tell me where you're at. So, you're obviously, if we see these numbers high, and I did
Mm-hmm.
go to my GP and showed her because my GP is integrative, so she can read
Yeah.
these things and kind of believes in it. Um, and she knows I can't eat gluten. So,
Mm-hmm.
because to do the biopsy, and I've tried the biopsy so many times, and she's like, well, Vanessa, obviously where they've biopsied hasn't been the right spot. Keep doing what you're doing. In my eyes, you have celiac, so just don't eat gluten. And we were emailing, and you were like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the biopsy. What are you, what are you going to do? You're going to go
So where am I
keep
at? I
eating
also want
gluten
to.
and getting tested?
So I haven't been eating gluten for months after I got the results,
Okay.
just because just because it did feel, like when you see that, sorry, like let me pull back a little bit. When you see that, and as a naturopath, you know that it's not just, a gut reaction to gluten. If you
Mm.
eat gluten when you have celiac disease or where there's intolerance to that, you are putting yourself at risk of many different things.
Yeah, I know.
First of all, many other autoimmune conditions.
Yeah.
Unmanaged celiac can lead to autoimmune thyroid conditions,
Yeah.
etc. Lots of skin stuff, poor nutrient absorption. And this is actually my big one. I
Yeah.
always thought that it's low hydrochloric acid that's contributing to things that, I'm always nutrient deficient in something. But
Mm.
then now I'm thinking, oh my God, it was celiac all the time, most likely, right?
And we
So what
spoke
I'm trying
about
to,
SIBO, for you as well. But of course,
exactly.
SIBO and celiac go hand in glove. A lot of people who have celiac end up having a bacterial overgrowth in their small intestine.
Yes, exactly. And so yeah, I went to my GP and he ordered a test with celiac serology when they
Oh, yeah.
actually also look at the
Good.
anti-gliadin.
Yeah. You have
But
to be
I've done that
eating the gluten for that one.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Also looked at the genes, but I've done my genetic test before, so I already know that I also have the whole cocktail, the all homozygous for being a celiac. I have the whole bouquet. And I talked to him about the fact whether it could be triggered out of nowhere. Because I'm very positive that, like, last time I did my blood test was a year ago on the celiac serology as well, and there was nothing in there. And I'm telling you, well, can it change? And he's like, Sophia, I have in my practice seen many times it actually being activated and triggered by the gastro, like by some kind of a gastro bug
I've
or
seen it
whatnot.
too. I've had
Yeah.
three clients, I'd say, three or four,
Yeah.
yeah, where it's come out of
So,
nowhere, and adults, in their
yeah.
30s, 40s.
And because you see, in my case, gluten is not affecting me that much. So I
Mm.
can't say that I feel crap. I started noticing a bit of a rash as well. I get a bit of a face rash when I eat
Yeah.
gluten. And I definitely like know that it contributes to some of these deficiencies, but I'm willing to go through that because it's not as debilitating for me just to do that biopsy,
Yeah.
just to get the confirmation.
Yeah. Good
Because
luck.
thank you.
Three
Even
months.
though
I'm
even
here
though
for you.
even though we know that with our knowledge and in our profession, especially,
Mm.
yes, I can see you highlighting zonulin when that is high, suggesting a leaky gut.
Mm.
I would honestly say, look, maybe don't need to bother to go through that process of confirming. But I'm doing that purely from, having this more of a scientific mind and thinking, well, I want to know what it looks like. I
I
want to
think
know
it's
what the
important to
process is like.
confirm.
And also
I,
because I've never done colonoscopy. So I'm like, well, it wouldn't hurt, right? I
yeah.
mean, it will hurt, but
No, it doesn't hurt at all. I've had a lot, one every 2 years since I was 19, because I've got serrated polyposis disease. So I'm at risk of bowel cancer. So every time they go in, they're cutting out sometimes 20, 30, sometimes eight. Last time it was eight.
all
So that's the
right.
other reason why I take gut health so seriously, is because every 2 years
Yes.
I've got, yeah, these growths, and I'm on the biggest experiment ever this next 2 year cycle.
Mm.
I'm doing
And
all
have you
sorts of
been
interesting things to see, is it going to impact it? Because there is obviously a genetic element to it, Sophia, because I eat clean, I think clean, I'm the difference to you. I wash my hands, and maybe I need to do the hygiene hypothesis.
it's a good experiment. I do this, you do
Yeah.
that, and then we compare.
Yeah. But I think it's really important. I think having data is really, really important.
Mm. Have
Um,
you been gluten free since 19?
Majority, yeah.
Because you
Oh,
wouldn't even
probably
get a
younger,
chance to have
16.
the. All right. So you wouldn't even get a chance to do the test, the colonoscopy when on gluten.
They've tried. I've tried. But you got to eat like 4 pieces of white bread a day. And
And is it
my
for 3
problem,
months?
Sophia, is, yeah, well, that's what it used to be. My problem is bedridden. So I cannot get out of bed, my fatigue. So, and I spoke to my husband about it, and I said, look, if I'm going to do it, it's going to be like 1, 2 months of pretty bad, and then it's going to be another month or two of me regaining my energy, because the small
Mm-hmm.
intestine needs to heal, so then I can absorb my
Yeah.
nutrients. It means my clinic will be impaired. I won't be able to show up. I need to use my brain. Like, I feel like I'm so much smarter. My cognition's really, and I can't have
Oh,
brain
of
fog.
course.
In
Because brain
our,
fog is one of the biggest symptoms
yeah,
of that kind of a gluten
and
intolerance.
in our job, we can't have, I can't have be turn up to work and go, I don't really feel like working today. I'm just
Oh,
going to be on
exactly.
the internet, or I can't do that. I have to think, and I have to use my brain. And so
Exactly. Have
I
to be
just,
present.
yeah. So I just don't know. I do the bone scan, I do all the things and all the checks. Um, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I'm looking forward to hearing your results. Zonulin.
Yes.
So people talk about leaky gut, intestinal permeability. A lot of people have never heard of it. You'd be interested to know. So a lot of my clients have no idea what it is. And this marker is so important. So for my clients in the US, we've got to add it on as a test, but in Australia, it is included.
Mm-hmm.
So zonulin is it's basically looking at, isn't it, the amount of that protein in the gut wall. So the more the zonulin, the more the leaky gut you have. And the
Yeah,
more that, things that shouldn't be escaping into your bloodstream are essentially getting through the lining of your gut. So we've got to heal that. We've got to get that.
exactly. How I usually describe the whole concept of that, it's we are actually like a donut, that the inside of our gut is actually an outside of us, right?
Yeah.
So whatever comes in, your body has a very sophisticated mechanism to understand what needs to be absorbed and what not. And that's why you need to have a very strong intestinal lining for that, your gut lining. It's same as if your skin. Like
Mm.
many probably know that if you get massive burns on your body, one of the biggest risk factors, the sepsis, is the infection because you're not protected. And it's exactly the same concept applies to inside of our gut. If that gut is like leaky, as we say, and we try to shift from that terminology because it's not quite correct. The correct way would be say increased intestinal permeability,
Yeah.
which means that, yes, as you mentioned before, the things that should stay inside and that the body is saying, no, I don't need that inside of me. So let's say waste, because that's how the waste is leaving our body, is all of a sudden getting reabsorbed back into the circulation, into your blood. And from there, we see things like, all the skin conditions, most of the skin conditions, your eczema, your psoriasis, even some of the, like rashes and acne and things
Yeah.
are accompanied with the high amounts of zonulin and that increased intestinal permeability. Then when we look at, and that would be a lot of your knowledge in there as well, with
Mm.
all the sorts of arthritis, joint pains, and inflammatory conditions.
Yeah.
Quite often it's just because everything that's in the gut that's undesirable is leaking out into the bloodstream and creating all sorts of inflammatory havoc in the gut.
It's significant, isn't it? And I think this is where you need a practitioner who uses their brain. So you need someone who says, oh, just don't just take this for leaky gut. It's about looking at the big picture and going, okay, well, what's going on there? You used the word before dysbiosis, so I am going to go up a bit,
Mm,
where we start to look at, are there pathogens? They contribute to the muddy waters. Is there Helicobacter? So Helicobacter is like a corkscrew bacteria that plays havoc in the stomach. And we don't want it there, do we? We've got to get rid of it. It
mm,
reduces your stomach acid and,
yes,
and
and
can impact.
contributes to many other overgrowths down the line. And this is, another
Absolutely.
point where it's hard to just talk about one specific marker isolated because
No,
we always see at the whole picture, right? We always look
absolutely.
at the whole picture and we see things as they interconnect. We're like, for example, high Helicobacter pylori, reduced hydrochloric acid, from that reduced bile output, from that overgrowth,
And
from
then
that
we see this,
overgrowth,
a
leaky
party
gut,
here.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is a good, I'm a sample, has some, she's not looking too bad. But usually you and I see these bright red. We see
Mm,
this light up like a Christmas tree. And,
yeah.
the one that you mentioned earlier here, this is the one that's been related to Parkinson's in the research
Yes.
lately. I
Oh,
see
fascinating.
these often. So people who have inflammation, autoimmune conditions, these are often bright red. And so what we've got to do is work through, okay, what's going on? What some of these bugs are more implicated in the small intestine, some are more implicated in the large colon, some are sticky. They're hard to get rid of, gram negative versus gram positive. So what we've got to try and work through is how does this align exactly what you said, Sophia, around symptom? Because,
Yes.
you could have a heap of methane and you're constipated. And we go, okay, well, here we go. We've got some things that we could work on with you, food, might be some supplements to help really reduce that. And this is powerful
Mm.
stuff, isn't it?
It is. And yes, also, as you mentioned, lots of research now picking up on how some of these, specifically in this
Mm,
inflammatory or autoimmune related section,
yeah,
how these bacteria are contributing to a variety of different conditions.
it's full on. And look, one of our favorites, you and I, is this one. These are the good
Oof.
gut bugs, this section.
Oh,
We,
these
lo-
two,
we love these.
Stachymantia and Faecalibacterium prusnitzii.
Oh,
I think I'm ready to write a book on Faecalibacterium
yeah,
prusnitzii.
yeah. Yeah. They're fantastic. And look, we often see, don't we, where they're low,
Mm,
then that secretory IgA is also low. So these are absolutely essential for immune health. And
yes.
there's foods, there's certain things that we can do to really boost those up. So when we're
And not
looking at the
just
context, we're looking at all of it, aren't we?
exactly. And and with these two guys, it's not just the immune health. There's so much association to
Oh,
cardiovascular, metabolic stuff. So often people can't lose weight. You look at their
wait, what
gut, there's
about this
no
one?
echymansia.
We look at this ratio, don't we, often? To
Yes.
say, look, if it's really high, I can tell if someone comes to me and says, I'm trying to lose weight, I'm doing all the things, but this ratio is really high, then
Mm.
we know it's going to be really difficult for them to lose
And then
weight.
you pair it with no echymansia, which is so associated with that. And yeah, there you go, a beautiful recipe for that.
Yeah.
So, which again tells us that there's so much we can learn about it and not just about the gut, about the
It's,
mental health. One of the
mental health is
recent
huge.
cases I also had was, just post COVID. There was post COVID fatigue and heart issues in a young man. And one of the things that we figured out, it was the absence of the Akkermansia and the Faecalibacterium prausnitzii
Yeah.
that we know has a direct link correlated to causing all sorts of cardiovascular issues based, if you pair it with a diet that it's more refined and more like meat heavily based.
Mm,
There you go.
yeah. Powerful, powerful information.
Mm,
And it bounces up quickly. Like we see it bounce up within a couple of months, 3 months. And
mm.
then look, the
And
other things that
especially
we
when we
cover.
know what to do.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And the right sequence, I think, is,
Yes.
so you don't get your test result often and then, have one consultation where we say, okay, done, off you go. Usually it's about, okay, you've got a plan and this is the sequence and this is why we're doing the sequence because you just can't target everything at once, especially if you've got pretty bad leaky gut or intestinal permeability, if that zonulin's
Mm-hmm.
particularly high. We've got to do things in an order. But that's why people
Yes.
start to regain their health. I had a lady yesterday and she's like, Vanessa, I can't believe it. She's like, 1 year ago, my energy was 5%. So I talked to people about the size of a battery, 100%. She said, last month before I started seeing you was about 40 to 50%. And she's like, today it's 70 to 80%. She's like, in 1 month, my energy has gone significantly through the roof. And she's doing the plan. We laid out the plan. She's doing it. She said, look, I'm not doing it perfect, but she's doing the best she can. And she's got significant shift. And as you know, it's because we're working on the real fundamentals.
Yes.
Powerful stuff. Not only is her gut better, she's like, I'm pooping without even trying. But it's the flyaway things, the things that she didn't come to me for, like her energy, her happiness. She said, I make the bed every day. And she said, for me, making the bed is really important. It makes me feel like my house is tidy. She said, I haven't had energy to do that for years.
And
I
now
was
I
like,
do. It's
I know.
fascinating.
So for her, it's important. And we've got obviously parasites and worms and things like that. So powerful stuff. We love this test.
We love this test. Look, and especially after you told me that you are doing this for yourself, like twice a year, or how often do you
Oh,
do that?
I
And
will
like,
do it twice a year this year
mm,
because of that scary result I got. And I'm doing a full on gut healing protocol, my own protocol. But usually once a year, I do this
hmm
and the metabolic test and some other functional testing once a year. Because, look, to be honest, I'm heading into perimenopause. I do have certain gut conditions, which I mentioned. So I really want to be optimizing it. My daughter, who has
exactly.
autoimmune disease, when she was chronically sick, it was every 2, 3 months. So it was a bit
Yes,
much. It was a huge investment, but it was able to give us the information where we could keep pivoting and
exactly.
adjusting her plan because we've
Yes.
got to remember that this test is based on a stool on a certain day. And the microbiome and the gut changes quick. It's very
Mm.
responsive. It can
Well,
change
yeah, in
within
about
seven
2 weeks,
days.
yeah, or even
Yeah.
7 days. So there you go.
Yeah. It's
And you can
fast,
often
isn't it?
catch that with the preferences that you have to food. I sometimes see myself for a week, I can, fall off the track with everything, especially if traveling or whatnot. And then you just can't go back to it because you're already whole reshaped, into being a different person with a different gut.
It's so true. It's so true. Like after Easter, it takes a while for people to get back on track.
Not for us Eastern Europeans. We eat hard boiled eggs for Easter.
Oh, there
That's
you
good. It's
go.
just a very high protein diet.
Lots of protein. I love it. So before we go, any final remarks on the GI map that you'd love to share with people if they're not sure, if they're worried about the cost, if they're worried about the benefit? Any final
I guess,
remarks, Sophia?
the biggest remark I could do is really following up on what we said just now, that, it's such a good self care thing to do. Even if there are no many big symptoms, like you and me, generally healthy, right? I wouldn't say that there's like a massive indication for us to do that, but by doing it, you can find so much about what is happening when it goes into the prevention. And don't we all want to know what's happening with us before, like literally shit hits the fan, right?
Yeah, I
So,
do. I want to.
well, exactly,
Yeah.
because quite often we know that generally in our healthcare, one of the biggest issue is lack of early diagnostic. And this is your early diagnostics. We have found so many things in patients, especially when it comes to, like, looking for blood or inflammation in the gut before any other symptoms, and people were able to prevent it.
Oh,
Even some
absolutely.
scary things
Absolutely.
like colon cancer, we can
Yeah.
pick it up way before you have any symptoms, and the doctor refers you to do the colonoscopy.
Yeah.
And when we catch things early, it gives us, a massive, massive benefit of being able to actually address it.
Mm,
Because, like you would know, if you catch cancer in the initial stages, it's not a big deal.
mm,
It's very easily reversed. So, yes, I think this is probably one of the most important things in any functional testing is the
yeah.
ability to catch things before they've gone bad.
Yeah. And the evidence is just growing so significantly, isn't it? That
Mm.
health begins in the gut. And it's like I can never say it. Hippocrates said it all those, years ago, where, health does begin in the gut. And what we're learning now through research, and there's big research institutes in Sydney that are looking at this, that there really is a correlation with so many conditions and gut health. So, yeah, for me to be able to optimize it for myself and my family, then yep, we're doing it. My husband, just as a side note, so we did his gut, and he was fit and healthy, but he just couldn't shift a bit of weight, and it was digestion. So once we started to optimize his digestion, he lost 14 kilos and he's just kept it off.
Oh, wow.
He's just his lifestyle really hasn't changed. But it was working with that. So that was a couple of years ago.
How
So
amazing.
yeah, and it's quite powerful. And he's happier, of course. And at his age, in his 40s, it's really important for his health.
Yeah.
Thank you for today.
So nice to chat to you about that. I could go for
Absolutely.
hours
Oh,
with
you
you.
and I do, don't we? All right. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.